Hey guys, just a quick disclaimer. You'll notice that my video is a little bit longer than everyone else's, and that's probably because mine's a great example of how to put a lot of stress on yourself very early on in the game and burn out quite quickly, I guess. So it's a pretty good example of what not to do. But anyway, have a listen. I was happy with my results, but again, I did put a lot of stress on myself. So, alright, thanks guys.
Okay, we're good to go.
Good to go?
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, my name is Petty. Thanks for clicking through. Hopefully you guys learned something valuable in this. So the first thing is that I'll tell you a little bit about my rotations. So I started off with Peds at MMC, then at Cabrini, then I went on to Women's at Dandenong, then I went on to Psych at Dandenong, and then I went on to GP, which was near my house, 2 different GP places. So in terms of my priorities throughout the year, in the first semester my priority was study and also a lot of extracurricular committee work. So TMC, which is one of the groups that we started, and a little bit of medball as well, because we did medball last year. In terms of the second half of the year, my priorities were revision, so by the time I'd finished my learning, so to speak, and then doing medball. In terms of my non-academic commitments that I had throughout the year, so I did medball, I was the Muppets IT rep, and I also started up TMC, the Medical Collaborative. In terms of my working, so actually like trying to earn some money to get me through the year, I worked at a pharmacy about roughly once a month, maybe a little bit more, and I only worked like 4 hours in a shift, so it was really, really chill. And sporting wise, I did netball once a week, which was like the highlight of my week. I really, really enjoyed that. And I went to the gym between 2 to 5 times a week, depending on my schedule, what rotation I was on, how tired I was, all those kinds of things. I lived at home, so that meant that, you know, I had the support of my family in terms of like cooking, cleaning, and just, support. So that's obviously helped me out a lot. In terms of my study methods, in terms of consistency, I was pretty consistent. I've never been much of a crammer. I can't really cram. Can't really remember things long term if I cram, unfortunately. The bulk of my learning was done in the first 12 weeks of semester. So I started studying 1 week before semester began. I started studying with Peds, and I did all of the lectures that were going to be done in the first lecture week. Went through them. And then started to write my notes, used some student notes, used some textbooks and things, and compiled my notes on OneNote, and then I started doing some questions. So after the 12 weeks of studying, I spent a lot of my time refining my knowledge and also revising by doing practice exams and questions. Once I'd finished Peds, which took doesn't take that long, it takes about 8-9 days if you like absolutely smash it out. Once I did that, I started on Women's, and what I would do is as soon as I would finish one particular rotation's topics, I would move on to the next rotation, and I would start doing exam revision questions for the previous topic. So once I finished off Peds, I started learning about Women's, but to consolidate my knowledge, I would start doing question bank questions for Peds, and I would do the exam questions for Peds. The first 12 weeks were probably the most horrendous 12 weeks of my life. I did not have much of a social life. I was under a lot of mental stress. My parents could probably tell you that. I was quite stressed at home. I didn't really spend a lot of time on myself, didn't really spend a lot of time with my friends. If I did spend time with my friends, I felt quite guilty that I wasn't at home studying, meeting my plans that I'd set for myself, meeting the goals that I'd set for myself. So I don't know whether I would really recommend what I did to other people, but it did mean that I got through all of the content in 4C in 12 weeks, which some people might think is a good thing. What that meant I had a lot of time for revision. Like I had 3/4 of the year just to revise, which is both again a good and bad thing. If you're doing it consistently, it means you'll hopefully remember everything by the end. I had a lot of extracurricular things that I needed to do, so that meant it freed up a lot of time for me to do those kinds of things. But then you also kind of get a little bit complacent. You start forgetting things that you learnt in the first week by the end of it. And so it does mean that you have to be really on top of your revision, really on top of what you've learnt last, what you're starting to forget, and making sure that you fill in those knowledge gaps. The first 12 weeks I pretty much studied purely by myself. I would get to uni early, maybe do an hour of study before my lectures would start, and then I'd go through the day of lectures. And because I'd already done the lectures, it meant I could actually focus on what the lecturer was saying and actually consolidate knowledge rather than learn for the first time in the lecture. After the lecture would finish, I would stay back a little bit and then do a little bit more study. Occasionally I even skipped my lunch break and studied through my lunch break. Wouldn't really recommend any of this, to be honest. But this is my experience, and this is what I did. From about week 13 onwards, I relaxed myself a little bit and thought that I could, take a little bit more time for myself, start to go out with my friends a little bit more, with my family, and just focus on light revision. I also focused on ball at this point because I had to start, me and a co-convener had to start organising ball, so we did that. And then after ball I had GHC, so I spent a week in Adelaide not doing any study whatsoever, working on my campaign for presidency and all that kind of thing. So there was probably a period of about a month and a half, maybe even 2 months where I did pretty minimal study. And it was only only like revision, maybe half an hour to an hour at night time. In terms of resources, I used Past Medicine and Past Test question banks, and all up completing about 4,000 questions in the course of the year. Again, a lot of that was done in the start of the year, around about the first 12-13 weeks. After about the first semester, I pretty much only focused on past exams that we had. So the ones that Monash has put up, I did them probably like 35 times. Legitimately, which didn't really end up in my advantage because the exams were completely new. And so what I would recommend you guys do is go through the past exams, find the EMQ lists, and just go through each option on the EMQ list and just tease everything out about that particular one. If it's a GP and it's like a derm condition, go through each derm condition and know everything about it. Epidemiology, how you treat it, how it presents, who it presents in, all those kinds of things. Just know everything about it. That way, when the questions do change, often the actual the answers don't really change that much, and you won't be caught off guard as much. So that's probably what I would recommend. Started doing my practice exams regularly, starting from about May, and then once I had a good grasp of the questions, then I would try to expand my knowledge around each of the different topics. For the majority of the year, I chose to study alone. This was partly because I like to try a new method of study each year, and this year I tried to study alone. Last year I studied with groups, didn't enjoy it as much, didn't think I was as efficient in studying. But then you get to a certain point of the year and you realise you actually need other people's help in order to get those final marks. So I was lucky enough to find some really, really good study groups, and we did VIA revision together, we did OSCEs together, and that is most definitely what brought me across the line and helped me to get the grades that I achieved. So I would definitely recommend doing that. I wouldn't study alone for the entirety of the year. I did have a study group at the start of the year for peds, but again, because of my stress levels and mental health, I probably didn't maximize on that like I should have. But I really made sure to try and prioritize my study group towards the end of the year. It does get a little bit difficult because people often have multiple study groups, so it can be hard to get timings correct and things. But if you can find yourself a group of like 4 or 5 friends that you can study with, do OSCEs with, and do OSCEs in like groups, like do 8 at a time, then switch, that is really, really, really helpful. Just be mindful that things often take longer than you think they will. People often tire out sooner than they think they will. So if you're planning to go through 2 entire exam papers in one session, it might not be achievable. If you're planning to go through 16 OSCEs in one afternoon with your friend, might not be achievable. Just keep that kind of thing in mind. I found the Psych and GP assignments the most difficult thing to do throughout the year, mostly because my English and essay writing is like deplorable, like it's absolutely horrible. And my grades reflected in that, they showed my poor English skills. Also, I've found that there wasn't a lot of guidance for these particular assignments, especially GP, and the marking appeared to be a little bit subjective, but it's kind of out of my hands. I would probably advise starting these assignments quite early, getting your friends' input. If you can, finding registrars to read over your assignments and give you tips, give you, tell you how they would prefer it to be written. that really helps. A lot of people did that and found that their essays improved because of that, and that's definitely what I would recommend. And a lot of the regs, if you're a good part of the team, if you've been there, every day helping out, they're more than happy to, spend half an hour on your essay for you. So that's really good. Towards the end of the year, I found finding time for family and non-med friends extremely difficult. I explained to my friends, my non-med friends at the start of the year, that I would not be a big part of the social gatherings that we were going to have, and they were quite understanding of that. I told my family that this was going to be the biggest year academically for me, and it's going to be the busiest year, and so I wasn't going to be around very much, and they were very supportive. But it did get really, really bad towards the end of the year, where I would probably go days without seeing my family. And this was purely because I would wake up before they would wake up, go to the library, stay until midnight, and then come home after they've gone to sleep. So that was quite tough, unfortunately. Put a bit of distance between me and my brother, who's quite young. And then I guess I just had to spend time rebuilding that kind of, that relationship afterwards. So again, you really have to decide how much this is worth for you. If it's worth putting a little bit of distance between you and family, if getting a couple of extra marks is worth that. I don't know if I would do it again, but I'm just telling you what I did this year. What would I change if I had to do it again? If I had to do it again, I'd probably do it in a very similar way, purely because of the kind of person I am, and I'm not very good at learning from my mistakes, unfortunately. However, I would probably stretch my initial study period from 12 weeks to about 16 weeks, because that was just the most mentally the worst time of the year for me. And I would have spent more time studying specifics of women's and GP, as they were the questions that I struggled with the most on the exams. I reduced the amount of time I saw my non-med friends significantly, and something which I thought was to my detriment this year, because again, it put a bit of distance between me and my friends outside of medicine. In terms of how much downtime I allowed myself time for netball and gym each week. I tried not to restrict myself in terms of parties and things socially, so if I knew there was a party coming up, I would do extra study prior to allow me to take that particular night off. And that's always been a big thing for me. Throughout the middle of the year, I had enough going on outside of my strict study to keep my brain from burning out. I took a 3-week holiday to Europe and to see my family back in Iran, so that was really good break. But again, I was kind of stressed about studying while I was there, so I guess my mental health wasn't great then. And there were particular periods like GHC and Ball where I was doing very minimal study, so again that kind of helped me to refresh. But I do think I burnt out by the end of exam period, and I was extremely tired, brain not functioning, try to study and just can't. And at those times I would stop studying, go out into the city, see some friends, have a drink or something to just relax myself a little bit. And finally, just in terms of some tips, I would actively avoid anything that you know is going to negatively impact you and impact your attitude towards study. So as an example, I know if I'm doing past question bank questions and I get them wrong, I feel really terrible about it. So if I know I'm about to get a question wrong, instead of just guessing it, I'll go and research the answer and essentially have an open book question and then get the question right, and that makes me feel good about myself and I can continue to study. So it's just little things like that that kept me going, kept my morale up, kept me like thinking I'm doing really well in my exams. So yeah. And the other study tip I would have is to make a really solid study plan. So I knew exactly how many questions I was going to do. I knew exactly what topics I was going to cover each day, each week, each month. And that meant that I could stick to it, and if I didn't make it, I could readjust. And that way I knew I wasn't going to miss out on anything, and I wasn't going to stress out because I didn't know what I was doing. That's probably it from me. You guys are more than welcome to contact me at any time, and I hope you guys have a good year. Thank you.